Hey, what's up, folks? Welcome back to On Texas Football. We got a very special show planned for you, talking about ESPN's FPI, their Football Power Index. We'll get into exactly what that means, the definition of it, and where the Longhorns are ranked in this predictive metric by ESPN. But first, let's thank our sponsor over at Flat Creek. We appreciate them very much and their ongoing sponsorship of and support of On Texas Football, and they're sponsoring this little segment we're doing about the FPI. We'll give you a special message from Flat Creek right after we're done with this breakdown. But joining me here, I'm lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers, of course, the estimable Gerry Hamilton, the young prodigy, fellow lifetime Longhorn CJ Vogel as well. And gentlemen, first of all, let me just explain exactly what the FPI is for those who don't know. The Football Power Index by ESPN. They've been doing it for a few years now. Here's the breakdown. This is their definition. All right. The Football Power Index is a predictive rating system that estimates each FBS team's strength in points per game relative to the national average on offense, defense, and special teams, making adjustments for starters lost, recruiting talent, and other personnel changes. Those numbers are then plugged into the schedule, and everything is simulated 20,000 times, all right, to track each team's odds of winning its conference, making the college football playoff, and advancing through to the national title. So it's a lot thrown into the mix there. But as we look at the FPI, gentlemen, the Longhorns, after the 20,000 simulations, they are the number one team in the FPI, the Football Power Index. You see it right there. Georgia at number 2, Ohio State at number 3. Well, Longhorns will see both of those teams on their schedule. Alabama at 4, Penn State at 5, the Oregon Ducks at 6, Clemson Tigers at 7, Miami Hurricanes 8, Notre Dame Fighting Irish at 9, Tennessee Volunteers at 10, Aggies at 11, LSU Tigers 12, the Ole Miss Rebels 13, Auburn Tigers 14, Michigan Wolverines 15, South Carolina Gamecocks at 16, the Oklahoma Sooners, yes, what time is it? Whatever, it doesn't matter. They still suck. They're at 17, SMU is at 18, Florida at 19, and the K-State Wildcats at 20 to round out the top 20 of the FPI. All right, Gerry, I'll throw it to you first. Longhorns, the top team in this FPI, above 2 of the teams they'll actually see on their schedule. We'll talk about their upcoming opponents, but let's talk about where Texas is right now according to this predictive metric.
It does make sense if let's just break down the first 3: Texas, Georgia, Ohio State. It does make sense from the standpoint of Georgia and Ohio State lost more than Texas did last year. Ohio State lost more than anybody in terms of offense, defensive starters. And look, they're very talented. They're going to recruit top 3 classes. We get it, but they lost a lot of impact players off that national championship team at dang near every position. Obviously, they have Jeremiah Smith, some really talented players on the team. So it makes sense. Georgia lost more on defense, impactful guys, than any team probably. I mean, Michael Williams and Jalen Walker and Malachi Starks, I mean, just those 3 guys to start. They lost 9 defensive guys, I think, that were drafted or signed professional contracts. Now they have a lot of talent, but they're going to be younger than they have been on the defensive front in terms of depth. So it makes sense to me why Texas, if those are the 3 it came down to, why Texas is where they're at on that list. The interesting thing for me with, the way they factor all this is, how different it's going to look than your AP rankings, CJ, because your preseason rankings may have Ohio State 1 since they won the title, or maybe Penn State's 1, but Clemson's going to be a top 3 team. Texas is going to probably be right there, and Georgia's going to be ranked highly as well. But it's just interesting how different it's going to look, I think, from the AP poll perspective. But if we just talk about the top 3, I can see why Texas has come out where they have, because they have impact guys, a lot of impact players returning on their team. And obviously they signed a number 1 recruiting class. And I think the portal class is probably underrated as far as rankings go. But I think factoring in production and who some of those guys are maybe means more in this at the FPI than it does portal rankings. So I get why Texas is 1. Does that mean they're going to finish 1? I'm not saying that, but I do understand it. No pressure, Arch.
Yeah, no kidding is right there. I think it's really interesting looking at, you mentioned departures, right? Texas, 11 draftees, Georgia, 13, Ohio State, 14, Alabama, only 7, yet you still see them in that top 4. A lot of that, of course, portal additions, but also recruiting, right? And you could probably argue these 4 schools that we just mentioned up at the top 4, Texas, Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, over the last 5 years, I don't know if there's been a team outside of that top 5 for a single recruiting cycle. So it certainly feels like talent stockpiled, talents rebuilt, all about getting these rosters, and Roger, I think the big word you mentioned in the definition of the FPI is predictive measures, right?
Yeah.
And all of this is just a prediction based off of the models and their algorithm on what these schools could do on the field, how deep they are. Well, looking at previous recruiting trends, it makes a whole lot of sense as to why these are the most talented teams in the country.
They have Texas predicted at 10.4 wins. Ohio State also at 10.4 wins. Those are the 2 predicted with the most wins. Georgia squeezed in there with 10.1 wins, and they have Penn State and Oregon also predicted to be double-digit win teams. Those are also teams that are in that championship conversation there. But the overall FPI, they give a score, and Texas has the highest score, which is 28.5. Their FPI rating overall, I believe, and Georgia's right behind them at 26.6. I don't want to spoil it because CJ dropped a nugget on us in our kind of pre-show discussion here. CJ, I don't know when you want to reveal this nugget, but I think it's great because we're talking about the overall FPI rating, which is different than, I guess, kind of the rank is based. What the ranking is based on is the rating, and 28.5 is what they came up with. Can you share with the folks give us some perspective on what that means for Texas based on some recent predictive metrics by ESPN and their FPI?
Yeah, believe it or not, this predictive measure, this algorithm is pretty good, right, in terms of predicting what might happen in a given season. Texas 28.5 FPI rating, that is the highest a team has had in the preseason since 2022 Georgia, in which they held a national championship. You look back a little bit at 2023 as well. Michigan was their number 1. We all remember what happened with Michigan in that year as well. So pretty good indication of what might come. Not going to say it's obviously going to happen, but this model, this algorithm for the FPI has been pretty accurate in years past. But Texas, over the last 3 years, one of the deepest, most talented teams that we've seen in college football.
Hey, Rod and CJ, I want to point out one thing that's interesting about this, where we're at in college football today. Rod, your thoughts on this? Texas, new starting quarterback. Georgia, new starting quarterback. Ohio State, new starting quarterback. First game ever started will be against Texas. Alabama, first-time starting quarterback. Penn State has Oregon, new starter, first-time starting quarterback. 5-year top 6 teams. And Notre Dame and Tennessee the same. Miami has a new quarterback that apparently none of the girls like at this point, if you believe TikTok. But everybody other than Clemson and Penn State have either first-time starting quarterbacks or new starting quarterbacks in the top 10. That makes me wonder, Rod, is this list, how different is this list going to look at the end of the season?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I have even said I feel better about Texas making that championship run and winning it all in 2026. I've said that on the record. I just feels like that's the year's kind of build to that crescendo. But I'll throw it out there. It's a Kim Kardashian, Nicki Minaj, Serena Cardi B size, and Megan Thee Stallion size. But how many first time or first full-time starters, I should say, because RH is a first full-time starter. He did start a couple of games. How many first full-time starters have won a national championship in the last 15 years? It's happened, quite a few times. Now, everybody wants a veteran, but we've seen a lot of first. Now, it's usually with a program that's got the support around that first full-time starter, like a Texas stacking those classes, as CJ mentioned. But, Alabama's done it. That's Nick Saban. He's the GOAT. We saw it with Stetson Bennett, right? Wasn't he a first full-time starter that did it? So I think it can happen. Florida State, Jameis Winston, I think, is also in that conversation too. And maybe a prodigy too with some of these guys like Trevor Lawrence that has been able to do it. But I think a lot of people believe Arch is a prodigy. And Texas has built up a lot of talent around him. So I was actually thinking that would be something that could hold Texas back. The more research I've done, first full-time starters, it's happening like half the time now that a national champion is being led by a first-time full-time starter at the quarterback position.
What's interesting here, and Gerry, maybe you can help me draw this analogy to a close, but in the NIL era, you kind of have to look at it like it's the cap space for an NFL. You look at it for like an NBA team, right? Teams only have so much to work with. And most times you have to deal with a really talented quarterback. And if you have to go portal for a quarterback, that guy's going to take up, quote unquote, a lot of your cap space for your NIL, offseason. Well, for some of these homegrown quarterbacks that we've seen hoist trophies recently, Stetson Bennett at Georgia, J.J. McCarthy over at Michigan as well. Arch very much fits that mold in which they were not. I'm talking about Stetson Bennett, J.J. McCarthy, necessarily the overall strength of an offense, right? They were able to basically use them as a great complement to a great running game. Or for Georgia, you had a tremendous running game with one of the best defenses we've ever seen, in large part because of modern day recruiting in the portal, NIL retention as well. But for Texas, you don't necessarily have that problem, right? You don't have to spend a whole lot of money going out to attract a quarterback. You can also use that NIL money to build a lot of really talented pieces around them, which Texas has done out of the portal. Jack injuries, Emmett Mosley the fifth. You look at the defense and where they're ranked and what they're bringing back. That homegrown ability, it kind of gives you that hometown discount. Not saying, Arch isn't making a couple dollars here and there, but when you get those bird rights in the NBA or when you get those max contract deals, it's certainly more favorable for the teams that drafted and developed Texas, obviously, in that same boat without having to go overspend for a guy out of the portal, allowing them to build the rest of the roster elsewhere. So I thought that was an interesting analogy that I hope made sense there.
Yeah.
But for Georgia, Michigan, it made sense winning a national championship with guys that they recruited and developed. Texas in a good position to do the same with Arch Manning.
Agreed.
Yeah. No doubt. All right, let's look at some of the opponents Texas will face that are ranked in this FPI, guys, because you talked about it. I mean, the top three, Texas is going to face the two teams ranked right below them, Georgia and Ohio State. But looking at, I'll say this about Georgia, they must have made some monumental changes on the offensive side of the ball, and there's got to be a lot of belief in Gunnar Stockton.
Yes.
That he is going to evolve and become a guy that can facilitate, even if they do get those weapons, be able to facilitate the football via the passing game. Ohio State, there's no doubt. I mean, that's the best wide receiving room in the country. No matter who the quarterback is, it's almost hard to screw that up, in my opinion. Like they're gonna have weapons galore. No team. It's only like 4 teams in the country that can match up with all those guys. To me, so that's where their advantage starts. But what are your thoughts about some of the other opponents that the Longhorns are going to be facing on the schedule? A&M, ranked pretty high in these rankings at 11. You got the Sooners ranked at 17 in these rankings. You got the Florida Gators. They're at 19 in these FPI rankings. What are you guys' thoughts about the remaining the opponents also on Texas schedule that are ranked in this FPI? CJ, I'll throw it to you first.
Yeah, the big one obviously is A&M at 11, right? And A&M had a pretty good first year. We talk about favorable schedules. Folks like to point at Texas as one that gets a favorable schedule, but it's nothing in comparison to what A&M gets to trot out as well. But they have talent, right? The remains of what was a 22 class, 23, 24 have been talented for them as well. What's interesting for me is, will A&M have the quarterback to back up where they are in this ranking? At 11, you're expecting a guy that can really take over games. Marcel Reed showed that at times last year with his legs, not necessarily his arms, right? When you face teams like LSU who don't have that front seven, or didn't have that front seven last year, you're able to see the really dominant performance from Marcel Reed a year ago. But now you got some pass catchers, because I think that was one of the hindering issues last year. Noah Thomas Good, who else was alongside him in terms of getting guys open down the field? Well, now Terry Bussey's into year 2. You had Jonah Wilson from Houston, Casey Concepcion over from NC State as well. They've got a lot of pieces. Mario Craver from Mississippi State. They've got pieces at wide receiver now to make things pretty difficult. I like where they sit at 11. I don't think that's outrageous to start this season.
Nice. Oh, Jay, I think you muted.
Florida with 6.4 wins is amazing to me. Now, last year we were all in the Billy Napier's going 3-9, going to get fired train. So maybe we're overhyping Florida a little bit, but their front four, their starters are all NFL players on defense. Their interior guard, center guard, maybe the best in the country. DJ Lagway's health is my question. this year. I still think that's odd how the spring went for him. But Jaden Ball's a stud at running back. The freshman receivers they have are really good. J. Michael Sturdivant's a jet out of Flower Mound, out of the portal. If Eugene Wilson in the slot comes back well off his knee injury, he's an NFL player. I mean, you look around at Florida and you say, okay, their health, they took hits at wide receiver and secondary last year in a big way. If they stay healthier in those spots this year, they're going past 6.4 wins. The question is, how much higher do they get than that? Oklahoma at 6.9. The question, the whole thing there is if they go 7-5, is Brent Venables still the coach? But their defensive front's as good as anybody. I think they have pretty good depth. I'm not sure they're going to have the depth Texas has on the defensive front. But John Mateer has to have a really good year for Oklahoma. Now, last year they had devastating injuries at wide receiver, offensive line, and in the secondary. They lost their nickel and top corner for the seasons, right? I mean, they had some devastating injuries on that team. But if that brought the change they needed offensively, maybe it ends up being a blessing in disguise this year. But with that schedule, if they get past 7 wins on this schedule, I would say Brent Venables, those guys have had a good year. I mean, it doesn't take rocket science to be a rocket scientist. Look at that schedule and say 8-4 is a pretty good year on that schedule if you get there. But that means John Mateer has played at a really high level.
Yeah.
The other one that's on there, it's not Texas, but South Carolina, guys. If they can put it up around Lenore Sellers, they'll win more than 7 games.
Yep, I agree with you on that too, because he's a freak, and yeah, depending on how quickly, I don't know, his game evolves. If it becomes refined pretty quickly, yeah, he's a force multiplier. He's a difference maker at quarterback. There's no doubt about that. All right, let's move on to. They also have best projected offenses and defenses of the 2025 season. They go even that deep into their predictive metrics. And guys, this is, like I said, this is their algorithm. So I don't even know how this happened. 20,000 simulations, but based on this, they have Texas with the best offense and defense projected in college football. They actually have the top 4 projected offensive teams are also the top 4 projected defensive teams: Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State.
You know what's crazy about that, guys? Texas, Georgia, and Ohio State lost either 4 or 5 starters on the offensive line.
Yeah,
I mean, that is a major. That is a lot of losses for 3 teams on the offensive line. Oh, and by the way, they all lost their starting quarterback too. I mean, so that's a lot off those offenses to lose. And now you come back and look at the change, plus 10 for Texas.
Yeah, they're saying Arch is going to be better.
This is what they're saying is Arch is going to be a better player than Quinn, right? And the receiver, it doesn't matter if you lost Matthew Golden and Isaiah Bond and Jaden. It just doesn't matter. You're actually going to be better. That's a pretty bold statement and they ran it 20,000 times.
Yeah.
Now, I think Texas is going to be a faster team as a team than they've ever been. I said it going into the last year. I think they have more team speed. It's just the level they're recruiting at, right? But they're pretty much saying on those 3 teams, doesn't matter who you lost on the offensive line, you're still 3 of the top 4 offenses in the country. That's a pretty bold statement.
Wow.
Yeah. You look at the 10-plus jump in terms of the offense for Texas. To me, it's the gap in which they are ahead of Georgia. You know, the number 2 team, a 1.6 point gap there. They're expecting Texas to not just be the best offense in the country, but be the best offense in the country by quite a while, right?
Yeah.
You know, in terms of talent. And that's interesting because, Gerry, you mentioned the offensive line. That's one thing that I think Texas, as much as it sounds bad on paper to replace an entire offensive line, it doesn't feel that bad in Austin, obviously, because of these guys all being on campus for multiple years. You look at it, you got a 3rd-year guy at left tackle, you got 4-year guys on the interior at left and right guard plus center now, and you got a 5-star guy heading into year 2. So it's not like it's devoid of experience. And I think that's the big key for Texas, because when you look at recent national championship winners, Michigan lost a first-round talent at right guard, lost the last 6 games of the year, didn't miss a beat on the offensive line. Ohio State, very much the same last year when they were dinged up with a number of guys. Josh Simmons missed, back into the season, didn't miss a beat in terms of creating running lanes, protecting the quarterback, doing what they need to do up front. That offensive line starts with a lot, Texas having to replace a lot, but that talent, that experience remains.
Hey, Rod, I want to ask you on offense
Yeah.
two things about two teams not on Texas' schedule, but one that Texas played last year. Clemson, with Kate Klubnik and all the receivers back, running back's their question, but they have, I think, 3 or 4 starters back on the OL. I would say they're a little low on this. But then Miami. Is Miami really going to be this good on offense? They lost the number 1 pick in the draft and his go-to receiver. And they play in the ACC and still couldn't get to the playoffs. They scored a lot of points, but they couldn't stop any of us. Clemson's got to be a little higher than that offensively for me. And is Miami really going to be that good? Are they really going to be better than Garrett Nussmeier and Kate Klubnik and Oregon's offense? I have a hard time seeing that.
I agree. I would even I would put Clemson where Miami is. Seeing those wide receivers and knowing Cade Klubnik's a dude, I'm with you on that. I agree. But I say Miami's got Carson Beck. Carson Beck had a disastrous season last year. Before that, he was being talked about as a first-round talent at quarterback. I don't know if he can rehabilitate that image after last season. I think that's kind of what the predictive algorithm is banking on, is that Carson Beck has a bounce back season, and maybe he will. Offseason hadn't treated him that great, but we'll see if that's the case. But I'm with you. I think Penn State's offense, I would take it over Miami. I'd bump them up. And LSU, there are people saying that Brian Kelly has finally got the roster that he's been, working for the last few years. LSU can never seem to get the defense and the offense on the same page. Seems like now that may be the case for LSU. I'll say this though about the rating for Texas, because they're predicted to have the best defense and offense based on this predictive model. Strange thing is, I went back and looked at it, because this basically would predict Texas is going to have a top 10 offense and defense. Right. How often do we think Texas had a top 10 offense and defense in its history? I went back and looked. How many times? Top 10 offense and defense
once
in the country.
Once.
Top 10, both top 10 offense and top 10 defense in the same season.
I'm saying once.
It's more than once.
I'll say 4.
It's 8 times.
Oh wow.
Top 10. Now it happened. I'll give you the times. 9 that I saw. Somebody may find something different. 1914, 1920, 1942, 1961, 1969, 1977, 2001, and 2005.
Okay, so I was going in my lifetime. So I went 2005.
Sorry, I went all the way back.
No,
yeah.
And they were killing in 1914, Rod.
I went back as far as it would allow me to go, and just said, how many times has Texas done it?
Yeah. That's an amazing stat. So 2005 was my guess, was the only one, but 01. Obviously, Rod, you were on that team. But that makes sense to me. I mean, and that is a pretty bold statement, because Texas played for the national title in 09.
And this is the thing about it. So, exactly. 09 didn't even get it done. 08 didn't get it done. Like it ain't easy to do. Like, especially with 130 something teams. But CGL like this one. So I went back, look at the records of those teams, right? 1914, you went 8-0. 1920, 9-0. 1942, 9-2. What the hell happened? 1977, 11-1. 1969, you went 11-0. 1961, you were 10-1. In 2005, won a national title, obviously 13-0. In 2001, you were 11-2. So you were combined 82-6. And those
That's not bad. Two of those right at Carthage numbers. Yeah,
exactly. You have 7. I believe you have 7 undefeated seasons in the history of your program. 4 of them came when you were top 10 in both offense and defense. If they're gonna be that good, they're gonna be really freaking good. If they're top 10 on offense and defense.
And that's why, you see the plus 10 on the change for Texas offensively, and that might come as a surprise considering everything Texas lost on the offensive line, a starting quarterback, some wide receivers, a running back that scored double-digit touchdowns last year. And then you see what their numbers were a year ago. Texas was 29th in the country in points per game.
That's crazy.
So when it comes to ceiling and what could be expected with the talent on campus, and specifically at the quarterback position, I don't think that's outrageous to think a 10-plus number 1 overall quarterback or number 1 overall offense is that crazy. I don't think it's outlandish one bit.
I mean, if you think about Texas this year, guys, the starting running back and 2 of your starting wide receivers from a national semifinal team are back. I mean, those are 3 key pieces. I don't care statistically what they did. Those 3 guys started college football playoff games for you.
Yep.
That's a pretty significant pieces to put around Arch.
Agreed.
And, then you bring in Emmett Mosley, who was a starting receiver as a freshman at Stanford, and a tight end who was a starter at Cal and is a projected NFL guy. And suddenly you say, okay, well, yeah, Texas lost Matthew Golden, and yes, they lost Isaiah Bond, and yes, they lost Gunnar Helm, but look at what they just brought in offensively. And then you add the element of athletic quarterback. You also add the element of maybe better running back depth this year in terms of runners. Jaden Blue is really good out of the backfield in terms of runners of the football. And, it's not crazy to think, and I do think Texas is going to be a better offensive team this year. And by the way, better punter and maybe a kicker with more confidence as well.
I was going to say, you see the offense, you see the defense. That's great. I think Texas fans know that there's talent on both sides of the ball. What does it look like on that special teams unit, in which it wasn't pretty towards the back end of last year and probably cost you an SEC championship?
That's a great point, actually, right there.
Yeah.
We didn't talk enough about that, but that was last year. It was a liability for you. Pretty much on special teams. That won't be the case this year. They addressed that in the portal and in the offseason. All right, one other quick nugget, though, where we talk about best offense and defense before we move on and talk about the big games. It's possible, and I know this sounds like hyperbole, but it's very possible, especially based on some of the offseason hype and propaganda, that if it all goes right for Texas, you may have the best offensive player and the best defensive player.
Yeah.
In college football. Like, people are saying that best – Pro Football Focus has ranked him there. Best edge defender in college football is Colin Simmons. If you're in that conversation, you're in the conversation. The macro one to be the best defender. I've heard Gerry, you talk about that actually, that he's got a chance to be the best, considered the best defender in college football. And a lot of people were saying Arch, I think he's got his Heisman odds. Last time I looked, he had the best odds to win the Heisman.
Mm-hmm.
That means he's the best offensive player in the country. When's the last time Texas did that? Had that? Was it 2008 and 9? You might have come close, actually. 2009, because Cole was that damn good. Cole was really good on his own, and Earl Thomas was really good. 05, you were probably there with Vince and Huff Daddy or somebody like that, maybe in that conversation. That's how special the team can be, is my point. You have those special pieces.
Yeah, and look, I think when you look at Texas, it's quarterback, it's edge, it's multiple guys. What is it about? It's who can rush the passer, who can disrupt timing, and who's your quarterback? And Texas has the best of both worlds on paper. Now Arch is going to have the most pressure on him than any college player I've ever seen. And it's the day and age we live in. If he goes out and is a world beater against Ohio State, then it's going to get out of control. If he struggles against Ohio State, it's going to be the biggest teardown of all time after one game. They're not going to give him games 2, 3, and 4. They're going to tear his butt down after game 1. If
You're right.
Well. So, but Texas has never had the guys, multiple guys that can rush the passer and can impact the game in that manner like this at different positions. It's, Anthony Hill arguably could be the top linebacker in college football this year if he takes the next step. So that's where Texas is at right now. It's those premium position guys and guys who can really change a game. And that's the thing that Texas has right now. And obviously, we haven't had a guy like Colin Simmons. I'll say that. And there's been really good players, Brian Robison. There's been some really good, Tim Crowder. There hadn't been anybody like Colin Simmons screaming off the edge on the 40 acres. Not in my time.
Not mine either. I'm with you on that, Gerry. All right, gentlemen, let's move on to the top games, the most relevant, impactful games, according to the FPI, before we close things out. They have Texas in the top 2 most important games. Texas at Georgia and Texas at Ohio State. Texas at Georgia and Texas at Ohio State are the 2 top matchups. Texas does have also against Florida, which I think was 6th on this list. Texas at Florida. Road games. Man, Texas is Texas is going to be the road darling this year. No question about that. Texas A&M at number 1. Texas first home game here on this list. That slots in, I believe, at number 9 on this list. And then there's one more, Texas, of course, Oklahoma. I think that slots in at 13 on this list. So you got 5 in the top 13. I believe 3 of the top 6, 4 of the top 9, and the top 2 biggest games of the year. To your point, Gerry, about the pressure on Arch Manning. And I agree with that. I don't know if there's anybody in history that's had more pressure on them guys to succeed in college football than Arch Manning. I just don't. Can you name one? I can't. And those games.
No, I mean, the only guy maybe would have been Tim Tebow, but he wasn't in the same social media era. And his name was Tebow, not Manning.
Amen.
I mean, that's the one. I mean, if you just look at this, I mean, Arch Manning and Texas are playing at Georgia this year. I mean, he picked Texas over Georgia. I mean, that game, and Georgia beat Texas twice last year. That game, Arch Manning's first start on the road ever is at Ohio State, who won the national championship, beat Texas in the semifinal, and kind of knocked Arch out of the game last year. By the way.
About that. Yes.
This also, CJ, speaks to how good the FPI thinks Texas is going to be. They're playing at Georgia, at Ohio State, and at Florida. And they're still by far the number one ranked team. That's kind of crazy to think about.
Yeah, especially when you look at that 10.4 projected win total. I know Vegas only has them at 9.5, so that's almost a full win above what other odds makers are believing. The one thing that stands out to me, Texas has 5 of the top 13. Georgia has 4 of the top 7, including 1 and 3, excuse me. You talk about, just top end gauntlets of a schedule. Texas, you talk about the holistic schedule. It probably isn't great in terms of some of the home games this year, but I would argue there isn't many schedules in the country that is tougher from your top 4 or 5 games, perhaps, than anybody in the country.
I agree. Georgia's schedule's brutal, and that's why somebody close to that program said they wouldn't be surprised if Georgia lost 4 games this year because of all the losses they had. And then you look at that schedule. I mean, you're at Tennessee, you're at Auburn, who's going to be a better team this year. Auburn's going to be a better team. They've recruited really well. And then you sit there and you say Alabama and Texas are coming to town too. I mean, Georgia's got a hell of a schedule in front of them this year, guys.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, you're right about that.
Florida neutral, who Florida can now play with Georgia. So that game has been kind of blowout city a little bit, and Florida fans didn't have any confidence going in. Florida fans are going to have confidence going in.
They stuck around last year with an inferior roster.
That's right.
Yeah, and with DJ Lagway, they play like they believe. There's so many wild cards out there now with these quarterbacks and how well they're going to play, right? How well does Gunnar Stockton play with all that talent around him? How well does John Mateer play? Because does that play of him being one of the best quarterbacks in the country at Washington State translate to the SEC? If it does, then Oklahoma's going to be a problem if it does, right? DJ Lagway. If DJ Lagway is healthy and DJ Lagway continues to progress, Florida could be a real problem as well. So there's so many of those little wild cards, I think, in there as it relates to FPI and those quarterbacks that we're just not sure. Like you brought up, Gerry, those kind of first time full-time starters. We don't really know how they're going to perform. If they perform well, man, this predictive metric could go completely awry.
Hey, by the way, outside of the guys that are on the hot seat, you know who I might not want to be as a coach this year? Is Kalen DeBoer. Because the expectations are unrealistic at Alabama, right? You think guy's a great coach, but look at his schedule. At Georgia, at South Carolina against a great player, at Auburn in the Iron Bowl, and by the way, Tennessee comes to your house. I mean, that's the team that's ranked top 4 in FPI too, and they have a really tough road schedule in front of them this year.
One other thing I wanted to mention for Texas, you talk about the length of a season. Texas has the only game on this metric in August, and they have one of the latest games of the season in November 28th against Texas A&M. You talk about having to be bought in for as long of a season as possible. Well, then you got a playoff, hopefully right after that, even after your season starting all the way back, August 30th.
That's a good point. That's why Sark divides it up, right, into basically separate seasons because he knows how long that schedule is. Great stuff, guys. Appreciate all the insight. Let's thank our sponsors, our friends over at Flat Creek Estate Winery. We really appreciate them and their ongoing support of On Texas football. Did you know the most awarded wine in Texas is actually the vineyard closest to Austin? That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Flat Creek Estate Winery is just minutes from downtown Austin, and they've won award after award this year for their vintage wine, Super Texan. Super Texan is now available at your local spec, so you can give it a try. And of course, Flat Creek is also a gorgeous venue with barbecues and wine tastings every single weekend, perfect for a day date with your significant other or a weekend getaway with your significant other. That's Flat Creek Estate Winery. We really appreciate them and their ongoing support of On Texas football, really. And I love, by the way, Flat Creek State Winery. The Super Texan is really good. I'm not just saying that. We actually have a bottle. Maybe we did. It's already gone. In there in the kitchen. The rosé is refreshing. It's fantastic. And I actually saw some at our local Central Market here in town. So not just reading the live for you guys. Trust me, it is a really good wine. And the venue is great too. No matter how special the occasion, they can accommodate any request you have. That's flatcreekestate.com. All right. Thank you very much to Matthew behind the scenes. He's a real MVP. Couldn't do it without him. He does all the great work for us behind the scenes. Thank you, Gerry. Appreciate your time. We know it's valuable. CJ, thank you for the expertise and the great breakdowns. And thank you for all you guys out there for joining us, and for Gerry and for Matthew and for CJ. I'm Lifetime Longhorn Rod Babers. Until next time, hook 'em horns.